Good evening, welcome to Last Spell Boxing, joined by, I'll call you Channel 5 Supremo tonight. Caj, is that okay?
I'm not sure my boss would love that, but yeah, you can. Head of sport is what they call me normally.
Okay, well, I'll stick with the traditional one. Head of sport from Channel 5, Caj Sohal. Good evening, Caj.
Good to see you again, guys. All well? All well in Nottingham?
All well in Nottingham, thank you very much. Bit snowy, but we're all well. So, it's been a while since we've had John, Caj. So first I'm going to say congratulations on the performance of Channel 5 Boxing.
Yeah, we're really pleased with it at the moment, yeah.
And thank you for bringing boxing to terrestrial TV, because I understand Channel 5 is the only channel doing it in the UK.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, isn't it? I mean, I don't think boxing's ever been as popular as it is right now, generally. And you look at, any given weekend in the UK, the number of bouts there are, the number of boxing nights up and down. And, certainly at that other end of the spectrum of the really big super fights that come ahead that seem to happen all the time. So, obviously we're pleased that we're doing it. We like doing it. We think there's an audience there, and it's been proven. And we don't have massively deep pockets, so we're not going to compete with all those big fights that you see elsewhere. But I think there's a place for us, and that place is probably shining a light on some of those fighters on the way up, and some of those fighters that have probably been missed or not fallen through the cracks, but just probably haven't had the exposure that they probably deserve.
So let's have a quick look back on over 2022 then, Caj, because me and Andy have given our views on our live show, Thursday at 9 p.m, just a quick plug. Which fight did you most enjoy from the many fights that took place in 2022, Caj?
Wow, that's a good question. I should have thought about this properly, shouldn't I, before I came on? Well, we finished with, something that was quite spectacular, and that was the Josh Kelly fight up in Newcastle. Obviously a bit of a local derby up there as well. And it was just so nice to see a sold out arena. Geordies being Geordies, everyone was having a great time from about 5 o'clock. And it was just, I think it kind of showed you what you can do on free to air TV without spending the huge amount of money. These fights can be made and can be put on, and all that credit goes to Wasserman. It's been great working with them. I think the other thing that stood out for me is probably Harlem Eubank. Look, I'll be honest, I'm not a boxing expert. I'm not, my expertise is putting on sport on TV. So I know a little bit about sport, but I don't have that depth of knowledge that you guys have or the Wasserman guys have when it comes to boxing. But we all thought Harlem might be a name that, would do something. But I think we were surprised just how quickly he's come on. I mean, right back to that very first fight when the Udofia fight. I can't remember who he fought, but there was a punch there that was just, amazing. And we also looked at him and thought, hold on a minute. And then the figures for Harlem, the viewing figures are as good as anybody else. He's got something that people like. I mean, those were the two standout figures, I guess.
It comes across to me. Harlem comes across to me as a very genuine person. I've never met him. I've never met him. All I can take is what I see from this side of the camera, and he comes across very humble, very genuine. And it's very nice to see that he stepped out of the shadow of Chris. I know that Chris will say, well, he was never in my shadow, and Harlem will probably say that as well. They don't train out of the same place. They've got completely different coaches. Adam Booth's doing a brilliant job with him, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, he is. I mean, that's the thing. You're in the shadow. You've got a challenge when your name's Eubank anyway, haven't you?
Of course.
To start with, you've got that, and then you've got a cousin who's doing incredibly well. But he's just quietly gone on with it. He's just got on with it. He's a really intelligent guy. He thinks about lots of other things beyond boxing. He's got a plan. He's got a plan on how he wants to make this work, and we want to go with him as far as we can on this journey and see where he can go to. Adam Booth is just been great for him, I think. And have Wasserman, who have supported, encouraged. It's a funny sport in many ways, isn't it? Boxing, when you come to it from different areas, so much depends on the support you have from your promoter and what's in front of you. And I think he's in a good place, and we're really looking forward to. That's the second fight of the year for us is going to be Harlem down in York Hall. So yeah.
Just going back to Cole. Just going back to which why we're talking about it. Just going back to the Josh Kelly Troy Williamson fight. That in a lot of circles, that was a pick 'em fight. People weren't sure how that was going to go.
Yeah.
And I think because of that, it had this massive appeal that you only normally see from a gigantic headlining fight, really. I mean, even on our show, there was so many different opinions on how the fight was going to go. Some were picking Kelly to win by stoppage, others by points. Some were picking Troy Williamson to win on points. But just brilliant. Congratulations on bringing that fight together, by the way.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's not always possible to get that kind of fight together because, as you need both sides to agree to it and take a little risk. And some people in boxing and some boxers and some promoters and coaches don't want to do that. So, hats off to both sides to actually agreeing to the fight. And you're right. I mean, we didn't know. We weren't sure. We thought, if it goes beyond 6, what's Josh going to look like? In 8, 9, what's he going to look like? And then, he surprised us all. I mean, he didn't even sit down, did he, between rounds? He just stood up and refused to take the stool, just stood up and just showed us a little bit more about what he can do. But yeah, we have to give credit to both boxers for actually taking that fight. And it's difficult. It's difficult, and I understand. It's a weird industry again. In sometimes, when a boxer loses one fight and people think he's all over, and we're seeing that with Josh. That that's not true. We've seen that with Lyndon Arthur now. That's not necessarily true.
One question for me, Caj. Obviously, when we spoke before, we talked about boxing purists first for additional content and to build a narrative behind fighters. I've got some figures for your viewing figures on both Williamson's fight and Eubank's fight. Might not be true, but I'll have a shot in the dark anyway, Caj. So he's telling me that you peaked around 950,000 for the Eubank fight, and he's telling me that you peaked around 850,000 for the Williamson fight. So let's say that's in and around where it needs to be. Surely that shows you the demands here, maybe to widen the scope around production around the fighters.
Yeah, I mean,
is there any plans for that?
Well, I mean, the other thing I think to say about that figure is that's like a sort of a peak figure. But when you look over how many people actually tuned in, because some people will just tune in.
I've got them as well. Yeah,
I like using those because they're bigger.
Yeah, okay. So you're looking at in and around the 1.8 million mark is what I'm
That's
led to
That's
believe.
the one. That's the one. I forgot what your question was now.
You told me. There you go. I use that line on the CAD.
So what are you saying? Are you asking, does that give us scope to do more?
Yeah. So when you go to your bosses and you say, look at this, because that's clear progress, I'd imagine, Caj. They're big numbers by anyone's, imagination. Surely that leads into, can we grow this even more? And can we do a bit more with the narrative around the fighters?
I think it certainly leads into, can we do more? And can we do more live fights? And that's a discussion that, we're actively having right now. We have already put into place, I think, 6 for this year that we know that we're going to do. We'd love to do more. And the only way we're going to do more is if we get decent figures, So it's a really easy equation, really. If boxing fans tune in and we get good audiences, we can get more boxing.
I'll tell you where sorry, Caj. I'll tell you where I'm coming from. I'll give you an example. Matty Harris. Harris is, he's been on other platforms with Channel 5 in his own, you'd probably argue. Comes from the West Midlands, massive following. Surely that's an opportunity for Channel 5 to galvanise that. I'm just thinking out loud, Caj.
Well, Matty's definitely one we've got earmarked for this year. You'll see him, I think, maybe on the second fight I think we're doing. I think maybe at your call Matty's on. But he's definitely one we've earmarked. The stuff about doing stuff around fighters that isn't live is more of a challenge on a free-to-air channel. If you're a sports channel, you've got a lot of hours to fill, and you can do that.
Yeah.
On a free-to-air channel, we know that the value really is in live, so we can do stuff around that with Matty. That where we can control stuff. For instance, I'll give you a good example of it. We're doing some darts now. We're doing like a seniors tour darts thing with Phil Taylor. So Phil Taylor will be on the Jeremy Vine show. He'll talk a little bit about darts, but then he'll talk about other things. Harlem will probably do that. So we'll use the assets we've got, I think, to try and build these guys a little bit more. We can get them into other programming. That really helps just to get their profile. But yeah, completely. I mean, whatever we can do, whether it's on air or off air, whether it's in partnership with somebody else, we want people to know who these guys are. I mean, that's the biggest advantage we've got on Channel 5 over, say, a BT Sport, is that we can get eyeballs on a fighter very quickly and build their reputation and their names, in one or two events to millions, literally millions.
Caj, in and along the lines of the last question that Carl just asked, I think we asked you this when we first had you on. We were first talking about how many shows you were going to be doing in 2022, and you were saying it was going to be a time slot of 9 till 11. Now you've had, I think you did 6 actually last year, didn't you?
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
Now you've had those shows, and the figures are brilliant, by the way. Is there any scope to bring that 9 o'clock slot down to 8 or even 7?
I think, well, I mean, it's interesting that, isn't it? I mean, 7 we've never really discussed. It gets harder because you've got to deliver bigger audiences.
Yeah.
So, the channel right now will probably get in excess of, 2 million at that slot. So whether we can sustain it for that long, because boxing, the thing about boxing as well is when you're putting on your live sport, it might last 30 seconds. It might last an hour and 10 minutes. Yeah. We're never sure. So if you went on and your main bout finishes early and you're doing, the supporting bouts on there, it does affect the audience. We find a lot of the time it's hard to keep an audience beyond the main fighter.
Yeah.
So those figures that we get where fights do well is usually when fights go long.
Yeah.
When a fight goes short, a lot of people switch off to something else. So it's difficult. It's difficult to try. I mean, I know what you're getting at about whether we can show the whole card, which I know people want to see. I think what we're going to look at, this year is maybe try and get that on our sister channel, which is Sport Action.
Okay.
5 Action, which is our sister, which is on the EPG, so you can find it.
Yeah.
So that's something we've got. I think we've got to make that card stronger to do that.
The reason I ask that, Caj, is because that's the main thing that comes out of our live shows. We'll never review a Channel 5 show. They always say, "I wish it had started earlier," because fans proper boxing fans want to sit down on a Saturday night with a takeaway, a couple of beers with the mates in front of the TV, and watch boxing all night long.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's it's a challenge for us is getting that much airtime.
Sure.
If it was on Sky BT, it's not a problem.
You do lose a bit of the build-up, Caj, don't you, by coming on so shortly before the bout. That's one thing I would say.
It's a thing now. Whatever the sport is, whatever the live sport is, and maybe it's because there's so much sport on. Back in the day when I first started doing this, we'd do like sorry, just switch this.
You're man in demand, clearly, Caj.
Yeah, that's probably somebody saying about tea's ready. When I started, you do like an hour build up to things. Whether it's football or anything else. Boxing, you might do quite a big build up, but because there's so much sport on now, while there is a committed audience that will tune in, it's not as big. It's just not as big as it used to. So, if we do say like we're going to do some live rugby coming up later in the year, even 5 years ago, we'd probably come on half an hour, 45 minutes beforehand, do a build up. Now we find that not nobody, but the vast majority of people don't tune in until the whistle. And then
is that because society wants everything now at a click of a finger and they don't want to wait for things?
I think there's a lot of competition for stuff. So if you're, imagine you're sitting in the house with your partner and your partner doesn't like sport your window for watching sport is not, you know, unending. So you might have to wait and time it carefully, and you do it straight on the event, and then you leave straight after the event. There's that, and there might be something else on. That's the other thing. If there's something, the live thing is where the value is. So if there's another live thing on somewhere else, so, you know, we would look at, say, I mean, a good example of this, we're doing some darts at the end of the month, but we know that darts is going to have to finish at 5 because England are playing Ukraine in football. And if we don't, the vast majority of people are going to switch over to that. So you're in competition with other stuff, which makes it harder to do those big build-ups that we would like to do. You know, as a producer, that's where you put in all your work, is making these lovely films beforehand, building up the fighters, doing all that. But if people aren't watching it, then we've got to try and find a way of doing it off TV almost. So put a little bit of effort into everything else that we do online, social, and that sort of stuff. And as we say, you know, getting onto other programs with like Jeremy Vine or whatever. But yeah, it's all, you know, in the end, it's about if the audience comes to it and it's big enough, you can do it. You know, but if they don't, then it's really hard to get the airtime off somebody else, you know, on the channel.
Yeah. I've got a question I'd like to put to you, Caj. Obviously, the Sohal brothers are heavily involved in the Misfits boxing world.
Yeah.
Firstly, what are your thoughts on, let's call it, crossover boxing? And second, could that ever find a home on Channel 5?
Well, look,
Caj, before you carry on, answer that second part very carefully.
Well, look, I can talk about it generally, obviously, because it's on the zone. So, you know, and the guys do it with those, and they do it really well. My view of it is I wouldn't even use the term crossover. I just treat it as something completely different, which is, I think, what they're doing. You know, the idea that it's not Wasserman boxing, it's Misfits boxing. You know, I know the other show the other day in Saudi Arabia with the Fury show, you know, it was a mixture of, you know, celebrity boxing and real boxing, wasn't it, on the card?
Yeah.
My view is that they're two totally different audiences. You know, I don't think many boxing fans are really interested in it, in the celebrity, Misfits type things. And I think the sort of audience that they get for Misfits and the celebrity boxing, they're not really interested in boxing. Some of them might look at it and then get hooked, but most of them are there for the influencer or that particular prop. You know, guys, I don't have an issue with it, but I just think it's a completely different, separate thing. You know, and I don't really understand when it's mixed like it was the other day in Saudi. I can't see who that serves really. And if they go just full whack on this, you know, influencer boxing stuff, then it's just a separate entity, nothing to do with the sort of boxing.
It's got a WWE element about it, hasn't it?
Yeah. That's right, Carl. Actually, that's pretty much, you know, that's a good way of describing it. That's sort of what it is, isn't it? It's not really, and you don't worry about.
I went to the latest KSI fight. There is a caveat here, Caj, to hear me out. I went along. I took my daughter.
Yeah.
And I've got to admit, the production side of it is absolutely brilliant. I went to the weigh-in, the press conference, and the fight. And the lead-up is all very good. And I can see why it draws the attraction of certain audiences. But when it comes to the in-ring experience, I've got to admit, from a boxing, it's just not where it needs to be.
Do you know what? It's like that, what's it called? Soccer Aid.
Yeah.
You know, there's much at Old Trafford, and, you know, 80,000 people come because they're not coming to watch the football. They're coming to watch the people who are there. You know, the celebrities who are there. And it's the same with this. And if you can separate that in your mind, you know, then it's fine. I mean, I know they sometimes say it's real, but it's weird. You know, they're getting that weird belt thing that they did for that particular fight was a bit odd.
I agree with you, guys. I think as long as you stay in their own lane, I think there's room for both, isn't there?
Yeah, you know, and if you want, and it's I really think it's a totally, like you said, your daughter wanted to go, or your son wanted to go.
Yeah,
and
my daughter's 11. That tells you where.
Well, there you go. You know, and that's what it is. You know, and it's a different thing. You know, it's just like seeing somebody in their world who's a celebrity, and they want to see him, whether it was singing, whether it's boxing, is whatever. I don't think, as you know, if in my world, that you would try and mix the two, because I think you just piss everybody off, quite frankly, by the end of it, you know.
Yeah. Before we let Caj go, Andy, have you got anything else you'd like to raise before? I thought I'd end it with a Misfits question because I think it's quite apt. It's bubbling away in the world of boxing at the minute. Fury Usyk, Caj, does it happen?
I've given up doing any predictions on anything happening at any given time. Probably. Probably at some point. It should. When? Who knows? I think, like a lot of these things, it'll probably end up being in the Middle East somewhere. And that'll probably be the deciding factor, I guess.
Yeah.
Last one from me, Caj. Being a Nottingham lad like us, I'm sure you had a keen eye on the Lee Wood and Ritzo Lara fight.
Yeah.
Thoughts on how that panned out? And Lee's got a rematch clause in there, which knowing the sort of character he is gonna trigger that, I'm sure. Do you think that should happen straight away, or do you think he should take a bit of time?
It just looks so in control, didn't it? It just looked. I was just thinking this is just superb, and it's all done. And then out of nowhere. But I guess that's what makes boxing so exciting compared to other sports when somebody's just out of sight. In football terms, you'd be 4-0 up, and it takes more than that to bring the opposition in. But in boxing, it was so deflating, wasn't it? Because you're so deflating because and I was already thinking, all right, well, the next one's going to be at the City Ground. It'll be like sort of.
We were thinking the same.
Yeah, and then whack. I don't know. He's got some good people around him. He's got good advisors. I think, as I said, we can't keep going around that route of you lose a fight and you're the worst fighter in the world and your career's over. Because, I think somebody else was saying, we can't all be Mayweather. You're going to lose at some point. But it doesn't mean your career's over, and it's just plotting that route back, isn't it, now? I think there's probably 1 or 2 fights out there for him that he could take if he doesn't go for the rematch. Depends on the opposition now, doesn't it, I suppose? Where does he go from here? Would he want to come back to the UK? It's going to be over there. I would imagine it'll be over there, wouldn't it?
No, I think Lara will come to the UK. I think he's happy to come to the UK. I'd imagine he'll get paid well for it, but he'll come to the UK.
Yeah. We'd all like to see it, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
Well, like you said, Lee was in total control. I didn't, me and Carl were looking at each other thinking, wow, this is an easy night's work.
Yeah, just...
Lara was getting frustrated. He wasn't getting... He was having no real success. And maybe apart from round 2, Lee was in complete control. It's just one of those...
He looked tired, didn't he? He looked tired, Lara, at the point. You're thinking like, well, okay, that's him done now. But, as I said, you just never know, do you?
Very, very dangerous fights, though, Caj, isn't there?
Yeah. You can
clear that.
Well, obviously a heavy hitter as well, wasn't he? Because
this is
what did you think about the throwing the towel in at that point?
Yeah, I think it was a good stoppage by Ben Davison. I think he would have really got hurt if he carried on. That's my opinion.
What do you think on that?
Yeah, when I was watching it, I hadn't really looked at the clock, and I didn't realise it was only 6 seconds or something, 9 seconds. So
more like about 10 seconds.
Was there? Part of me thought, if he had done that thing of just, dropped his gum shield or just walked to the wrong corner or something, and then brought I don't know, just seemed like so close. But better to be safe because he had no idea what was going on.
No.
He had no idea what was going on.
Throw into the mix, Caj, that he had a rematch clause as well. So you need to fight another day. And that's an awful expression, but you know what I mean by that.
Well, yeah, right. You're right. Thinking about it, I'm thinking back in my mind's eye now. He had no idea where he was. So it wouldn't take 9 seconds to do more damage, would it? It just only take 5 seconds to do something.
And Lee probably, when he looks back at it, he'll probably agree that he wasn't in the position to be defending himself.
No.
The way he needed to be. Because if Lara would have landed one of those really big ones again, you never know what could have happened.
Yeah,
Ben Davison's a very, very smart cooker.
I think you're right. If it's anything the way you land, if you're completely gone like that and you land badly and your head bounces and all that sort of stuff comes into it, doesn't it? So for the sake of sport, which is what it is, and to remember that it probably is the right decision.
Caj, this is why we all love boxing so much, though, because anything can happen.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose it's like, go back to the previous fight with Lee, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's one thing. He's in dramatic fights, if nothing else.
He is. He's very entertaining. Well, Caj, thank you very much for your time. Again, we'd like to congratulate you on the performance of Channel 5 Boxing, because it's been a great year. We look forward to future fights. Thank you for giving us your time.
Yeah, well, it's a pleasure. I hope you'll all be tuning in for the next one, which is Lyndon Arthur against Brian Suarez up in Bolton. And then the week after, we've got Harlem Eubank against Christian Uruzqueta, Mexican fighter.
Very good.
We're trying to get him up, and then we're going to get Josh Kelly back at some point. Chloe Watson's going to be out a few times. Matty Harris is coming out a few times. Wasserman guys are signing up some young fighters. Cody Smith, a few others that they've got their eyes on. So I think it's going to be an interesting year. Yeah.
I mean, that's the IBO world title fight for Lyndon, isn't it?
Yeah, it's another step. I know it's not we all know what an IBO world title is, but on the other hand, it gives him something to aim at and go for. And he's such an interesting guy. Again, like quite late to the game and everything else, but
Well, here's a stat for you to go with, Caj.
Yeah, go on.
Lyndon Arthur wins that fight. He's the first Englishman to hold the IBO world lightweight title, light heavyweight title. So you can have that for your press briefings. Okay.
I'll give that to Dave Farrow, the commentator.
Yeah. I'd expect to mention for copyright purposes, but you can have it.
We'll make sure he gives you a mention. Yeah.
No, Caj, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for your time. And we'll catch you soon. Okay.
Thanks, Carl. Thanks, Andy. Cheers.
Cheers, Caj.